Oh, and good evening. It's April 15th, 2025, and we're continuing our discussion collection in our Outside the Class series. This series is from the Bible Project. It covers the entire TaNaK, right? That Old Testament. On TheDustyFeet.com, in the Outside the Class section, all of those source videos are set up for your review. Because the intent of Outside the Class is for you to listen to the in-class lecture first. The source video playlist contains those lectures, because we're going to try to keep these to about 15 minutes. Make them easy to catch up on. So we're on a quest, scroll by scroll, book by book, a journey through this collection, but with a fun and maybe different twist. And Outside the Class on the Dusty Feet. And before we forget, if you find these kinds of podcasts useful, then please click the subscribe button. But remember, those reminders, they just help you. But also, if you think these might be useful to others, then you click that like button, because that is how YouTube chooses to share these to more people if they wish. So let's remember, the videos we're going to discuss here, they're just the tip of an iceberg, right? The beginning of a highly recommended learning series. The entire series. It's all available on the Bible Project website. Link is in the description. We'll ask many questions about all kinds of things. Answers? We'll see. Judges, Shoftim. This is our part 13. As we ended last week by saying the final 5 chapters in the scroll of Judges, well, let's just say they're not family friendly in any way. This episode is not family friendly in any way. I think this verse and phrase, well, I think it sums up the stories. It's from Judges 17, verse 6. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. I suspect most of you are not familiar with these stories, right? As we wrap up the scroll of Judges, even these could be called maybe straggling stories, but the beginning of chapter 17 sets the tone for the rest of the scroll. So take a listen. Now there was a man from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Micah. And he said to his mother, the 1,100 pieces of silver which were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse in my hearing, behold, the silver's with me. I took it. And his mother said, blessed be my son by the Lord. And he returned the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother. And his mother said, I wholly dedicate the silver from my hand to the Lord for my son to make a graven image and a molten image. Now therefore I will return them to you. So he returned the silver to his mother. His mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave them to the silversmith, who made them into a graven image and a molten image. They were in the house of Micah. And the man, Micah, had a shrine, and he made an ephod and household idols, and consecrated one of his sons that he might become a priest. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and every man did what was right in his own eyes. So, okay, in just those 6 short verses at the beginning, how many things went wrong, right? I mean, we could ask a question also where we've heard this before, right? As 1,100 pieces of silver, just a little bit before. But also, how many things in this text not only are not right by Torah, we even get I'm dedicating this to God and doing this in God's name, and I'm still not going to listen to what God told me what to do, yeah? Okay, I don't want to make a left turn right now, but I want to throw out a question. I want it to hang out there. I want it to linger. I want it to sit in the back of our brains, kind of hanging out, milling around. I'm ready to be asked. I mean, just because we say we're doing it in the name of God, or how it works for me, how might that look to God? Of course, in this context, it's very clear we have Torah as the basis for this anyways. But that lingering question should still hang around in the back of our head, right? How might that affect other ways other people do things? Not only as the scroll continues and the entire collection of scripture continues, but since we're in that scripture story, how do we fit in as this continues? Food for thought. But we need to remember, as we get it in this scroll as well, that the names of individuals, names of locations, repeated numbers, especially the tribes that are mentioned, they're all important to remember because part of this is going to play out as the story rolls and rolls and rolls down the road. Why do we see these different tribes interacting with other tribes later in the story? I mean, if we haven't paid attention to the Judges scroll, because then where are we going? Because I wonder why they did that, because what they did doesn't make sense, or why I don't see it. I don't see how that fits. But if we've taken the time to look at this scroll, like Rabbi Foreman said, where have you heard this before? Then maybe a light bulb can come on and we say along the lines of, oh, that's why it's happening. Because sometimes we look at it as God's interaction in things, and maybe sometimes it's just something as simple as it's been part of this story for a long time. Say, like the Hatfields and McCoys, right? They've been going at it for a couple hundred years, and according to the folk tale, nobody remembers why it's even started. This particular tale, if we go back to the story, I think sometimes we can take a peek at our biblical version at times of this Hatfields and McCoys and maybe some of that underlying tension. Just to give a little idea about what I suggested that you need to remember, I'm going to read just verse 7 for you to see why remembering certain things makes us think further down the road. Verse 7, now there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite. He was staying there. You know, if we took that verse out of context and we read it, we could actually maybe assign it to somebody else in Scripture. We could think about it. We could describe other things. It's part of the fun again, yeah? Where have I heard this before? As we get further along in the scroll. And are there any redemptive stories involved? Again, to entertain the thought of if I do this, God will bless me. We get down to verse 10 and 17. Micah then said to him, dwell with me, this Levite, right? And be a father and a priest to me, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, a suit of clothes, your maintenance. So the Levite went in. The Levite agreed to live with the man, and the young man became to him like one of his sons. So Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest, and he lived in the house of Micah. And Micah said, now I know the Lord will prosper me, seeing I have a Levite as a priest. I guess there's nothing quite like having your own priest, and your priest having his own post, living in the house. The tribe of Dan enters the picture, right, as we get to 18. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and in those days, the tribe of Danites were seeking an inheritance for themselves to live in. For until that day, an inheritance had not been allotted to them as a possession among the tribes of Israel. Again, you might want to go back to Joshua and earlier to find out those details. But here, they had 5 men that were spies, more like scouts, right, to get a lay of the land. They've run into this Levite. You know, oddly, his name's never mentioned. We only get that he belonged to Micah, right? But these men, backed by 600 armed men, well, let's just say they convinced the Levite to join them. Verse 18, then these went into Micah's house, took the graven image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molten image. And the priest said to them, what are you doing? They said to him, be silent. Put your hand over your mouth and come with us. and you can be a father to us and a priest. Because is it better for you to be a priest to the house of one man, or to be a priest to a tribe, to a family in Israel?" And the priest's heart was glad. And he took the ephod and the household idols and the graven image, and he went among the people. Hey, it's a promotion, right? An upgrade. Upgrade in living, a tribe to serve. 31. So they set up for themselves Micah's graven image, which he had made, all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. So we're in a mess, right? And it gets worse. This mess is far from over. We can see this spiraling. And we even get some more unnamed participants, right? Now, beginning in 19, now it came about in those days when there was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite staying in the remote part of the hill country of Ephraim. And he took a concubine for himself from Bethlehem in Judah. But his concubine played the harlot against him, and she went away from him to her father's house in Bethlehem in Judah. He was there for a period of 4 months. So we get to this point in chapter 19 that begs the question, where have we heard this before? So I need you to go back and read it. Please read chapter 19. Because actually, a couple of times, once we get this delaying a departure with a father-in-law. Hopefully you remember what those connections are. Again, all for the wrong reasons. And then we get to Gibeah. So we're in Gibeah. There's a stranger. This Levite's taking a detour in travel, right? And he ends up in Gibeah, and this stranger has taken the Levite, his concubine, his servant, their livestock. We get to 19:21. So he took them into his house, and he gave the donkeys fodder, and they washed their feet, and they ate, and they drank. And while they were celebrating, behold, the men of the city, certain worthless fellows, surrounded the house, pounding the door, and they spoke to the owner of the house, the old man, saying, "Bring out the man who came into your house, that we may have relations with him." Then the man, the owner of the house, went out to them, and he said to them, "No, my fellows, please do not act so wickedly. Since this man has come into my house, do not commit this act of folly." Sounds like another story that we've seen, right? Lot rings a bell. And if we had the chance to be a different result, well, those thoughts are quickly dashed in verse 24. His answer, "Here's my virgin daughter and his concubine. Please, let me bring them out, that you may ravish them and do whatever you wish. Just do not commit such an act of folly against this man." But the men would not listen to him. So the man, he seized his concubine, brought her out to them, and they raped her and abused her all night long until morning. And they let her go at the approach of dawn. As the day began to dawn, the woman came, fell down at the doorway of the man's house where her master was. Wasn't until it was full daylight. When her master arose in the morning, opened the house doors, went out on his way, behold, his concubine was lying at the doorway of the house, with her hands on the threshold. And he said to her, "Get up, let us go." But there was no answer. He placed her on a donkey, and the man arose and went to his house. And when he entered his house, he took a knife, laid hold of his concubine, and cut her into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout the territory of Israel. All who saw it said, "Nothing like this has ever happened or have been seen from the day when the sons of Israel came up from the land of Egypt to this day. Consider it. Take counsel. Speak up." It did not go well. So we're going to address the response to this in our last episode next week, right? We'll wrap up the scroll of Judges with actually a bit of God's judgment. 25,000 men it's going to cost. 25,000 in a civil war battle. These tribes of Israel, these chosen folks, they're in the land that God had given to them, and they're inside it, killing themselves. God's will be done. His ways will be honored. And his consequences? Well, there will be consequences. This is only the beginning. So thanks for being with us tonight on another Outside the Class with the Scroll of Judges on the Dusty Feet.